Once again, the TERFs are ruining everything. There is some serious drama going on right now in the queer book world surrounding the Polari Book Prize, a UK literary award established in 2011 celebrating LGBTQ+ literature, books that explore LGBTQ+ themes and experiences, emphasis there on the LGBTQ+. Each year, the Polari Salon release a long list of books going up for the award in two categories. There's the Polari First Book Prize featuring debut books by debut authors, and the Polari Book Prize, just the more all-encompassing list. And it was a book on the long list for the book prize this year that has caused absolute uproar. Earth by John Boyne. Now, I do feel the need to say going into this that this is my personal commentary. These are my personal thoughts and feelings around what's been going on here. This is just commentary on a very public debate. For legal reasons, this is commentary, okay? Okay. You may have heard of the author John Boyne for some of his more famous work. There's The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas or The Heart's Invisible Furies. You might also know John Boyne for being a self-proclaimed TERF. Now, I must admit that before this, I didn't really know the drama surrounding John Boyne. I even have The Heart's Invisible Furies sat on my TBR. Wait, I'll show you. The Heart's Invisible Furies. I've had this sat on my TBR for like 2 years now. I haven't read it because it is so long, but hey, at least now I have one less book to read, because after learning what I now know about John Boyne, I have no interest in reading his work. None. So the question at the centre of the debate is this: is it right to have a self-proclaimed TERF, a trans exclusionary radical feminist, who is besties with J.K. Rowling by the way, sat on a list of books up for an LGBTQ+ book prize, a prize which is apparently founded on the core principle of diversity and inclusion? This is a man up for a book prize on which a trans woman, Nicola Dinan, is sat on the judging committee, and other trans authors are also featured. Is that right? Well, at least 800 writers and other people in the publishing industry have signed a statement saying that no, they don't think this is right. The statement reads: "We are profoundly disappointed by the Polari Prize's decision to include John Boyne on the long list for this year's Polari Book Prize. Boyne has publicly and unequivocally associated himself with trans exclusionary sentiments, and Boyne's public statements on trans rights and identity are incompatible with the LGBTQ+ community's most basic standard of inclusion. In any year, the decision to include Mr. Boyne on the long list would be, in our view, inappropriate and hurtful to the wider community of LGBTQ+ readers and writers. That the decision has been made this year in the context of rising anti-trans hatred and systematic exclusion of trans people from public life in the UK and across the world is inexcusable." Just some of the many authors to sign this statement include Alice Oseman, Julia Armfield, Nisha Dolan, Kay Patrick, and Porna Bell. So let's look a little bit at John Boyne. Let's look at his history and his views. He is an Irish author and a gay man who is not a stranger to a bit of controversy. His best-known novel, The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, has been widely criticised over the years by Holocaust historians, scholars and survivors for some serious historical inaccuracies. The Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial Museum has explicitly warned that this book perpetuates very dangerous myths, namely that ordinary Germans were ignorant of what was going on with the Holocaust. Despite these warnings, research by the UCL Centre for Holocaust Education shows that over a third of teachers in England still use this book or its film adaptation to teach about the Nazi genocide. So if you've never seen the film before or read the book, the story centres on a boy called Bruno. He is the son of an SS commander at Auschwitz, a very high-ranking Nazi official who befriends a Jewish boy through the camp's fence. It portrays Bruno and his family as being unaware of the atrocities happening around them, thereby absolving the ordinary Germans of any blame. And historically, this would have been false. Children like Bruno would have been taught anti-Semitism at school and at home, especially with a high-ranking Nazi in the family as his dad. The ordinary German in this time was not an innocent bystander to the Holocaust. They were complicit, whether actively or through inaction. Most Germans knew what was going on. Researchers told us that most Germans knew what was going on. Bruno would have known what was happening. And this matters because the boy in the striped pyjamas has been shown to elicit misplaced sympathy for the Nazis. Many students come away from the film or the book believing this is a realistic depiction of history, and it reinforces the dangerous misconception that regular people had no responsibility. That mindset of, we didn't know, so we aren't responsible. It isn't just bad history, it's a pattern that repeats in the present. It's the same kind of logic that allows people today to be passive in the face of harm to marginalised groups, including, very aptly, trans people or immigrants. Ignorance becomes this excuse for complicity. And I saw Cabaret recently on the West End, so this is something that I could talk about for hours right now, hours. But I'm trying to keep my point succinct. So, how did John Boyne react to all this criticism? Well, in response to the critical essay from the Holocaust Memorial Museum, Boyne pointed out what he said were factual inaccuracies. He wrote on Twitter, "Whilst I absolutely respect your right to recommend some books and discourage the reading of others, it is worth pointing out that the opening paragraph of the attached article contains 3 factual inaccuracies in only 57 words, which is why I didn't read on." He then said that he treated the subject matter with great care whilst he was writing it, and that whilst readers were of course free to feel differently, he said that his book was a work of fiction, and therefore by nature it can't contain inaccuracies, only anachronisms, and he doesn't think any of those are in the book anyway. Yeah, not all our age as well. At the time where it's released, The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, it was received quite well by the general public. It won so many awards. It was one of the most popular books of the year. But I do think if you're willing to write about something which is so heavy, something which affected so many people, something which still affects so many people, you need to be willing to accept criticisms and understandings as times change. Especially from the people who know the subject matter best, like the people at the Auschwitz-Birkenau Holocaust Memorial Museum. They kind of know what they're talking about. If they're coming to you with criticisms, you're probably best to listen to them, I'd say. Now, I've never read the Boy in the Striped Pyjamas book. I can't speak directly to John Boyne's writing, but I did watch the movie as an adult only a few years ago, and it threw me for a loop, because as I watched that final scene, I felt a huge wave of sympathy towards Bruno's family, towards the Nazis, and I remember being so shocked in that moment, and I shook myself out of it. Because is that the feeling we want to invoke when talking about the Holocaust? I don't think it is. The movie, and I'm sure the book as well, provokes so many feelings, and I'm sure it was designed to provoke so many feelings. But I think sympathy for the Nazi family is probably not one of them, and it provokes that because you are led to believe that the family are completely unaware of what's going on. You're led to believe that Bruno is unaware of what's going on. The only person in the family who is complicit is the Nazi dads. But that's not how it really was. They're not the people that you should feel sympathy for in this situation. And obviously it goes so much deeper. This could be a whole 2-hour video essay in itself. But baseline, when you're talking about the Holocaust, the Nazis aren't the ones you should be feeling sympathy towards. That's it. So yeah, that was John Boyne's first big controversy. Did it end there? Absolutely no, it did not. His second massive controversy came around 2019 with his novel, My Brother's Name is Jessica. Yes, you heard that right. My Brother's Name is Jessica, a massively provocative title. This is a novel about a boy called Sam who idolises his older sibling Jason. And then Jason one day comes out as trans, as Jessica. The book is about Sam struggling with this big change in his life, and again, I haven't read this book, so I'm purely pulling from other people's reviews here, but it does seem to maybe centre the story and the struggle of Jessica's family over Jessica's actual thoughts and feelings, how hard life now is for them, rather than centering Jessica's story. And I think in itself, in an idea, this isn't an awful story to tell. There are different angles to every story. Of course, the families of trans people have their own thoughts and feelings and journeys with it, and I'm not taking that away at all. I do believe they are maybe valid stories to tell if you're doing the trans person justice. But here was the way it was approached, with the clickbaity provocative title and the way John Boyne spoke about it in the aftermath, that made the whole thing icky, to say the least. I found an article from The Guardian from 2019 titled "John Boyne Hits Back at Critics of Transgender Novel," and this article is very telling, to say the least. After the release of this book, he did very quickly start to receive some heat for writing about an issue with which he was unfamiliar, especially writing about it in such a contentious political landscape. He spoke at Hay Festival, which is this big book festival here in the UK, saying, "I've always said the worst advice you can give to young writers is to write about what you know. Write about what you don't know. If we only write about what we know, it's all biography. There's this awful thing, in my opinion, an awful thing, #own voices, that people can only write about their own experiences and stories. And my experience as a writer and a reader is the opposite to that." Now, I have made an entire video about this topic before. I provocatively titled it myself, called "Should Straight Authors Write Queer Characters?" And in that video I basically explore whether authors should be writing about experiences and communities that they've never lived in. Now, I do recommend you go and watch that video, of course, but the conclusion of it is essentially that yes, of course people can write about communities they're not a part of, as long as they take due care in doing so, as long as they do the research, as long as they talk to people in those communities, they take care of the stories and tell them with true intentions. The problem with John Boyne, and my brother's name is Jessica, is that he didn't seem to do any of that. And he doubled down on it. When he was asked about the provocative title of the book, he responded, "To be so politically correct, some people, it must be so painful to be so woke all the time." Like, sorry? That's your response? Even back in 2019, his empathy towards trans people, towards their voices being heard, their stories being told, seemed to be very limited, to say the least. Again, I haven't read the books, I'm hesitant to be too critical, I'm only talking about his response to the criticism here, but at least according to critics, the book is very exploitative of trans people, it lacks authenticity, and it was not properly researched. And you might be able to excuse this as an oversight, you might be able to excuse this as somebody, John Boyne, just trying their best and not hitting the target. You could excuse that if it wasn't for the fact that he is a vocal supporter of J.K. Rowling. He is a self-referred TERF. What right do you have to write stories about trans women when you are actively trying to fight against them? Is this a story really being told in good faith? Of course not. This isn't a well-intentioned man who has just missed the mark a couple of times. This is a pattern. In 2019, he said that he does support trans rights, but he rejects the word cis. He also said that whilst he is a gay man, he doesn't identify himself as a gay man. I don't get that one. And then he wrote a follow-up, later reiterating that he is a long-term ally and supporter of trans people. He wrote that he stands 100% behind trans people. On 27th of July 2025, so literally just over 2 weeks ago, Boyne wrote an article in the Irish Independent, which was a tribute to his friend J.K. Rowling on her birthday. It's titled, "As I write, I'm in awe of her achievements. As a reader, I love her work. As a fellow TERF, I stand four square behind her." Yes, that is the title of the article. I suppose now is probably a good time to talk about what a TERF is. So TERF stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. It's defined as a person whose views on gender identity are considered hostile to transgender people, or who opposes social and political policies designed to be inclusive of transgender people. TERFs believe that trans people are a threat to women, and you'll most often see them rallying against trans women in particular. I mean, who else is sick to death of hearing about the horrifying threat of trans women in female bathrooms? Like, I can't even count the amount of times I've had to have the argument with people that men aren't becoming trans to attack women. They're doing a pretty good job at that all on their own. Men aren't pretending to be women to attack women. They've never had to do that. They don't need to. They will attack us because they want to. TERFs fight behind this facade of they're trying to protect women, biological women, but really all they're doing is causing more harm to women, but we'll get into that. What used to be this fringe online talking point has now seeped into everyday conversations. People I never thought who would parrot this stupid nonsense. People who before 5 years ago had never even thought about trans people or trans issues are suddenly repeating very TERFy talking points with zero evidence to back them up. Why is this? Why is it now suddenly a big thing? Well, honestly, a big reason, the main reason, is J.K. Rowling. It is wild to think that one person could fuel so much of this, but that's what you get when you're a billionaire. Her viral tweets and viral essays dragged TERF rhetoric into the mainstream, and now it's wrapped in this shiny, protecting women label, but really being a TERF is just about gatekeeping femininity and making life harder for all of us. TERFs twist feminism into something really ugly. They make it not about safety, it's about exclusion. And exclusion isn't feminism. The gatekeeping of femininity only makes it harder for every single one of us. I actually found a quote in a blog post on nwlc.org entitled "Happy Pride, Don't Be a TERF," and this quote just perfectly summed up my feelings on this situation, so I'm just going to read it out for you. I'm going to read it on my iPad because I'm using my phone as my auto cue, but I always feel like, do you remember when iPads first became a thing and that one girl on the internet got absolutely ripped for taking a selfie in the mirror with her iPad? That's what I feel like every time I get my iPad out in a video. Anyway, the obsession with legislating, tracking and surveilling trans bodies is the same playbook being used to ban abortion and strip away bodily autonomy for people with the capacity for pregnancy. The goal is always control. They can call it radical feminism or being gender critical, but it doesn't change the truth. And if history has taught us anything, an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. So yeah, that's essentially where J.K. Rowling stands, and her friend John Boyne stands there right alongside her. He, in his own words, has aligned himself with her views. He refers to himself as a fellow TERF. In his July article, he criticised women who support trans rights and likened them, us, me, to characters in The Handmaid's Tale, complicit in their own abuse. He is a gay man. He's spoken at length about how difficult it was to grow up in Ireland when homosexuality was illegal at the height of the AIDS crisis. He knows what it is to suffer in a world where you're not accepted, the mental toll that that can take on a person. So I am just a bit baffled at the cognitive dissonance here. Like, how can you stand so proudly against another marginalised group, a marginalised group within your own community who are just trying to live their lives freely? Who, when you remove the mythical but the bathrooms argument, are causing no harm to yourself or others. Like, what harm are trans people doing? Like, really, what harm are they doing? Because I can't think of anything. So yeah, that's all the background context, and that is why people were up in arms when on the 1st of August, the Polari Prize announced their long list, and John Boyne's new novel Earth was the first on the list. Almost immediately, people started reacting, saying it was insulting to include him on an award that is specifically designed to celebrate the whole of the LGBTQ+ community. The Polari Prize was founded by a man called Paul Burston. He is an author, a journalist, and he used to be an AIDS activist with ACT UP. I actually read his memoir, We Can Be Heroes, A Survivor Story, just last year, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm really sad that my next run-in with his name is in this form. In the book, he writes about how the Polari Prize came to be, how he was frustrated by the lack of opportunities for LGBTQ+ writers to showcase, to be celebrated for their work. The Polari Salon, which was a place to showcase that work, was born out of this, in a small upstairs room in a bar in Soho in 2007 with just a few of Paul's friends, and then eventually it moved to the South Bank Centre where it's lived ever since. 4 years after creating the Polari Salon, Paul decided to begin the Polari Prize in 2011, and all kinds of books are eligible, including self-published work. This was meant to be a celebration of inclusivity and diversity. So does that diversity extend to authors who are actively opposing other members of the community? Like, surely that goes against the very nature of what diversity is. Once the long list was announced, people immediately started having questions about why John Boyne's name was the first one on the list. Was this right? The 800+ authors came together to sign the statement in opposition to his inclusion, and slowly over the next week, authors started to remove themselves from contention for this prize, from both the regular book prize and the first book prize. And I honestly cannot stress enough how much of a big deal it is for a debut author to remove themselves from a list like this. Winning such a big prize, the only UK prize really for LGBTQ+ literature, basically guarantees you another contract, another book. It puts you in really good standing for the future. So for these new debut authors to remove themselves from contention here means a lot. It means they feel really, really strongly about this. So as it stands right now, as I film this on Friday the 15th of August, like early in the morning, 16 out of 24 authors have pulled themselves from the list, 10 out of 12 on the first book prize and 6 out of 12 on the regular book prize. So removing themselves from the first book prize long list, we have Isaac by Curtis Gardner, Revolutionary Acts by Jason Okunde, Queer as Folklore by Sasha Coward, It Cannot Be Good Until You Say It by Sana Asan, Small Creatures by Amy Twigg, Blood Songs by May Diansangu, Unsuitable by Eleanor Medhurst, Mongrel by Hanako Footman, Impossible Heat by Kira Maguire, and A Place of Our Own by June Thomas. From the book prize long list, we have Like Water, Like Sea by Olamide Papula, Nude Against a Rock by Robert Hamburger, Person Unlimited by Dean Atta. I love Dean Atta, everything he writes, incredible. Pity by Andrew Macmillan, Girls Etc. by Rhiannon Elizabeth, and 3,000 Lesbians Go to York by Jane Trays. Two of the judges have also withdrawn, that's Nicola Dinan and Bob Hughes. Now each author has removed themselves from contention alongside a statement saying why, but a couple of authors have decided not to remove themselves from the running for various different reasons, but I do just want to read you the statement by Avi Ben-Viv, who is the author of Calling My Dead Name Home, The Trans Bear Diaries. He is in the running for the first book prize. This is quite a long statement, but it's very poignant, I think. As a queer trans man, the news of my place on the long list for the 2025 Polari Book Prize felt like a prayer answered. At a time when trans rights, our very existence, are under threat, this esteemed and highly visible recognition of my memoir, Calling My Dead Name Home, was just the affirmation I needed to keep writing, to believe in the possibility of more readers discovering trans stories, of hearing our voices. But my dance like no one is looking moment was cut short. John Boyne was also on the long list. At first, I figured it was an oversight on the Polari Prize's part. After all, the Irish Times article featuring Boyne celebrating J.K. Rowling's birthday and stating frankly and explicitly that he disputes my basic human right to exist was published after the long list was released. Perhaps the prize administrators weren't aware. But despite the evidence of the article, the resignation of a Polari Prize judge, the withdrawal of authors from the prize's long list, and pressure from the community, the Polari Prize has decided to keep Boyne's name on the list. The Polari Prize might believe that Boyne's name on the long list means they're inclusive of authors with differing beliefs, but here's the deal. Holding transgender exclusionary beliefs does not stem from a healthy philosophical questioning of what gender means. I believe it's a harmful right-wing ideology that ignores scientific evidence and has been used as fuel for threatening, hateful actions against trans people. James Baldwin's quote comes to mind: "We can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist." Yes, it is appalling that the Polari Prize has not yet removed John Boyne from their long list. I urge them to reconsider. And while I appreciate why some of my fellow long-listed authors have decided to absent themselves and their books from the Polari Prize this year, I love you and see you, I have decided to stay, holding tight to this rollercoaster ride. You see, removing myself from the long list would mean erasing my trans story, my voice. It would mean letting the transphobic ideologies win. I just thought that was very poignant and very well thought out statement. There are so many reasons why all the authors have decided to absent themselves, a showing of solidarity, a showing of support for the trans community. But the fact that Avi Ben-Viv, a trans person themselves, have decided to stay, it also sends a message, a different type of message. Again, as of me writing this, Boyne has also made one statement on on X, saying that this statement is all he has to say about this matter. He speaks about suffering an extraordinary amount of bullying and intimidation since the publishing of My Brother's Name is Jessica, not just at the hands of trans activists, but also by a small group of toxic novelists. I would argue, potentially, that self-referring to himself as a TERF is not helping matters. Of course, people are going to call you out on that. Anyway, his statement says, "My view on trans rights have never changed and they're quite simple. all human beings should have the same rights, but if the rights of trans women come into conflict with the rights of what you call cis women, then the latter must take precedence. There's 4 billion of them after all, and it took them 2,000 years to achieve even a semblance of equality. That's pretty much my only thoughts on the subject. I must say, I find a man talking on behalf of all women like this to be very jarring. He certainly doesn't speak on behalf of me or anyone in my immediate circle. Women have only recently achieved a semblance of equality, but that doesn't mean we have the right to take away the rights of others to maintain that. Like, never once have I felt like the rights of a trans woman have been a threat to my rights. And it's very weird that as a man, he feels like he can be the voice of that. I don't understand. To the organisers and judges of the Polari Prize, thank you for standing strong in the face of extraordinary intimidation. To the writers who withdrew from the prize and those who organised petitions, I say this. You may have wanted well, you may have thought you were doing an honourable thing, but you forgot one crucial fact, that the novel you're protesting and the novel you tried to exclude is part of a sequence about sexual abuse from a gay man who endured that very trauma at school, who was denied justice because my abuser died in the months leading up to trial and is still coping with not getting my day in court. And how do I cope? By writing books like Earth. So yeah, John Boyne's been through his own trauma, his own trials and tribulations. No one is denying that. Why does that make him okay to put trans people in danger? The cognitive dissonance is crazy. His book probably does have an important message. Again, I haven't read it. I'm not denying the contents of his book. But he's being like, be nice to me because I was abused, and now watch me fight for trans rights to be ripped away. How do they have anything to do with each other? Because by aligning himself with people like J.K. Rowling, that is exactly what he's doing. In May 2025, she established the J.K. Rowling Women's Fund, a private legal fund that sole service is to support gender-critical legal cases, to preserve what the fund describes as women's sex-based rights in workplaces, public life, and single-sex spaces. Born from J.K. Rowling's tirade, in April, the UK Supreme Court made a ruling justifying organisations such as the Equality and Human Rights Commission to begin issuing anti-trans policies, like the interim guidance that argues trans people should be banned from all public gendered facilities, including those associated with their birth sex. So sorry, you're just going to have to piss yourself because you're not allowed to use any bathroom. Other proposed changes to the RHC's Code of Practice has suggested that trans people may have to be forced to carry legal documents, such as passports or gender recognition certificates, whenever they're out in public. It's giving fascism, it is giving authoritarian control, where identity is policed. Do the TERFs really think this is going to help cis women? Do you think this is going to protect them in any way? Any woman who's not deemed to be feminine enough will automatically be subject to questioning. It becomes this very slippery slope. It's giving the pre-Stonewall, you have to wear at least 3 pieces of gender-appropriate clothing at any time. You think this will end at just trans people having to carry ID with them at all times? No, of course not. And this is the precedent which J.K. Rowling is setting. This is the battle that she started. Anyway, back to John Boyne's statement. I'll just read the rest all in one go. When I published my debut novel in 2000, I would have given my left arm to find myself on a prize list. This attention it brings to a new writer, or more importantly, a writer's work, is terrific. You sell more copies, your publisher starts thinking about your next contract, and you get to continue doing the job you love. It seems absurd to me that so many debut writers are losing their opportunity for this, either through misguided ideas about who I am, or, as I'm aware has happened in some cases, because you too were bullied or intimidated into withdrawing. I love fiction, I love literature, and I've always supported new writers through reviews and blurbs, so this alone weighs on me. So I propose the following. I have shelves of awards at home and my book sales are extremely healthy. I would encourage all the debut writers on the Polari longlist to return to the list to look forward to the shortlist announcement and in time the fun and excitement of the ceremony. One of you gets to win the prize, and that's as it should be. The organisers stood firm and didn't expel me from the long list, and I appreciate it, and I am not withdrawing from the long list. However, should the debut writers all return, I would respectfully ask the judges not to consider Earth for the shortlist, and I don't think I can say any fairer than that. I came very close to the edge this week because of the endless harassment at the hands of both strangers and fellow writers. I remained silent throughout, but there's been a few moments where I thought it would be easier not to go on. There's really only so much abuse one person can take. However, I'm still here, because I have too many books in me that I still want to write, and so do all of you. The Elements, the combined edition of all the novellas, Water, Earth, Fire and Air, will be published on September 9th in the US and September 25th in the UK and Ireland. I hope you get a chance to read it. I'm very proud of this book. But then I'm proud of all my books and the fact that I've spent my 22-year career helping other writers, elevating them and finding opportunities to promote them rather than trying to tear them down. Online bullying has to stop. Sigh, I don't even know what to say to that. Online bullying does have to stop. I'm a content creator. I know firsthand how awful people online can be and some of the awful things that can be said. Like, believe me, I get it, I know, I do feel some sympathy here. However, I also don't think it's right to hide behind this facade of online bullying is bad when you're out there spouting hateful rhetoric and vocally trying to take rights away from people in your own community. Do I believe John Boyne has received some horrific messages in the aftermath of all this? Absolutely, yes. Do I believe he's also probably received some fair criticism and feedback that he has taken as bullying? Also, absolutely. I can also see what he's doing in asking not to be considered for the shortlist for the Polari Prize. It does feel a bit like damage control perhaps, but I can see what he's doing. However, the issue at this point goes beyond John Boyne himself. The attention is on Polari for allowing this to happen in the first place. Where are the checks and balances? I'll have a bit more insight into why this happens later on in the video, but first of all, bestie J.K. Rowling has of course also been sounding off on Twitter, showing her support of Boyne. She has said that she hopes this will lead to more book sales for him and described the people who oppose him as the gender Taliban. I haven't looked at J.K. Rowling's Twitter in a very long time. I came off the platform myself a couple of years ago and I blocked her long before that, but I went into the Lion's Den for this video and you cannot make it up. I cannot believe that her bio is writer sometimes known as Robert Galbraith, her male pen name. The cognitive dissonance, like she is so happy to identify as a male when it's convenient for her, clearly. Other people can't do that. That's her bio. I genuinely spent 10 minutes on her X, and it gave me a headache. Like, that is a right-wing cesspit. That is my hell in a Twitter page. Just awful. So the Polari Prize themselves have released a couple of statements over the last week about all of this that's been going on. Obviously, they couldn't ignore it for much longer. On the 7th of August, they said, "The Polari Prize was founded on the core principles of diversity and inclusion. We are committed to supporting trans rights and amplifying trans voices as demonstrated both in the history of the prize and the Polari Salon, where trans and non-binary writers and performers have featured regularly as valued members of the LGBTQ+ writing community. The role of the prize is to discover the best LGBTQ+ books written in the UK and Ireland each year. The books are read and deliberated over by the jury and progress through the competition stages on the merits of craft and content. The Polari Prize is awarded to books in a spirit of celebration of the work and the stories they tell. We have always cherished freedom of expression and our determination to find our voice both as writers and readers. It is inevitable, given the challenges we face and the diversity of the lived experience we now represent under the LGBTQ+ Polari umbrella, that even within our community, we can at times hold radically different positions of substantive issues. This is one of those times." John Boyne's novel Earth was included on the Polari Prize longlist on merit as judged by our jury, following the process and principles stating above. While we do not eliminate books based on the wider views of a writer, we regret the upset and hurt this has caused. Polari is committed to inclusion, not exclusion. The resignation of our valued judge and former first prize book winner Nicola Dinan causes us great sadness. Nonetheless, we completely understand and respect her decision. Books are one of our best means to explore the most difficult and divisive issues, and we encourage an open dialogue across our community. It remains deeply important to us that our trans and non-binary readers and writers feel welcome, safe, and supported by the Polari Prize and the Polari Salon, and continue to participate in our movement as readers, writers, and performers. People had a lot of issues with this statement, particularly with the wording of trans people being a difficult and divisive issue. Trans people in themselves aren't a divisive issue, they're people trying to exist in this world. And it is shocking the amount of gay people who are defending Boyne and Rowling in the comments of this Instagram post. 50 years ago, the same language that they use now to try and discredit trans people were being used against them as gay men, as gay women. One woman did make a fantastic point in the comments though. Would they include a book on the long list if it was written by an openly homophobic person, regardless of the content or merit of the book? Polari are saying that the book wasn't judged on this author but on the content. But when it comes to something like this, you can't separate the art from the artist. And I would hazard a very strong guess that no, they wouldn't include a book written by a homophobic person on an LGBTQ+ long list. So why by a transphobic person? The statement, "you can't separate the art from the artist," is a whole rabbit hole within itself. There are many different avenues we could go down there, but I think with the Polari Prize it comes down to this. You are including an open TERF, a transphobe, on this list alongside multiple trans authors, people that may not be safe in his presence, or maybe that's dramatic, maybe not in his presence, but people who are less safe in this world because of the rhetoric that he is spouting. You're asking a trans author, Nicola Dinnan, to judge his work based on merit alone, but how can you expect her to remove her feelings from this situation? How could she knowingly award his work, knowing the attention and the money he would receive on the back of this, knowing it would only further his voice and his message? Sure, Polari can say that it's okay to hold radically different positions, but not when those radically different positions put somebody's life in danger. You're asking people, if they're put on the shortlist, to attend an award ceremony where John Boyne is going to be there next to trans people that he is actively trying to fight against. He is trying to fight against them having rights. Once again, I want to refer to the James Baldwin quote that I mentioned earlier. We can disagree and still love each other, unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist. Do I have friends who I disagree with over what is the best restaurant, Wagamama's or Nando's? Yeah, sure. Do I have friends who I disagree with on myriad different issues? Of course I do. Do I have friends who disagree with homosexuality, who disagree with lesbianism, who disagree with who I am? No, of course I don't, because that would be insane. You can't be friends with somebody who denies your own existence, who denies your right to exist. That's not how it works. Aisha Dolan, who was on the long list for the Polari Prize last year, said in a comment under this post, under this statement on Instagram, "I'm disappointed by the statement. It asks people to feel celebrated while claiming that their existence and rights are a fair debate. You cannot possibly take trans people seriously as artists and thinkers and expect them not to see right through that." So yeah, in general, this statement on the Polari Prize Instagram page went down real bad. They were destroyed in the comments. And so just 4 days later, they released another statement, which didn't really make things too much better. The past few weeks have been extremely difficult for the trans and non-binary writers and communities associated with the Polari Prize. The hurt and anger caused has been a matter of deep concern to everyone associated with the prize, for which we sincerely apologise. We accept and respect the decision of those writers and judges who have chosen to withdraw. Despite these events, we are committed to going forward with the prize this year. However, we will be undertaking a full review of the prize processes, consulting representatives from across the community ahead of next year's awards, and taking on board the learnings from this year. The shortlist for this year's awards will be announced shortly. So basically, they are just deferring making any moves to fix this problem until next year. I would maybe guess that they're scared of legal repercussions if they remove John Boyne's name from the long list at this point. And so, as a result, they're doubling down on keeping the prize as is this year. That is me speculating, I don't know for sure. They say they're going to release a shortlist shortly, and that is going to be a very short list. I will be very intrigued to see if Earth makes the cut even now on this very short list. Are they going to heed John Boyne's request to not be put on the shortlist? But if everyone pulls out and Earth wins by default, then I don't see how the Polari Prize are going to come back from this. So in my opinion, the only thing they can do to not fix it, I don't think there's any way they can really fix this at this point, but I think the only thing they can do is just cancel the prize in its entirety this year, but I don't know what that kind of thing would require behind the scenes. I don't know if they even can do that. I'll be very intrigued to see if when they release a shortlist, they have removed Earth from the list because of John Boyne's request. That is going to be, as it stands right now, there's only 6 books on the book prize long list left. So if they remove Earth, there would still be 5 books, which is a decent amount, I guess. On the first book prize, there's only 2 books remaining. Doesn't even mean anything winning at that point. I don't know. I would want to win because I've gone against the best of the best and my book has been proven the best. I wouldn't really want to win by default. And of course there's still time, those remaining authors could very much still pull out, I don't know. There might be some answers to be found in Polari's response to all of this, in Paul Burston's, the founder's, own views on transgender issues. In 2018, Burston signed an open letter to The Times criticising Stonewall's approach to transgender issues. The letter reads, "Stonewall has played a leading role in advancing the rights of lesbians, gays and bisexuals. It has also campaigned on transgender issues since 2015. We believe it has made mistakes in its approach that are undermining women's sex-based rights and protections. We urge Stonewall to acknowledge that there are a range of valid viewpoints around sex, gender and transgender politics, and acknowledge specifically that a conflict exists between transgenderism and sex-based women's rights." The letter asks for a respectful debate on the subject. Burston also signed a letter in The Observer opposing no platforming of individuals with feminist views critical of aspects of transgender activism. So it certainly seems like at some point, in 2018 at least, Burston's own viewpoints aligned with Boyne's. I can't say whether that's still the case today, but the Polari's response to this prize might say 1,000 words. The issue I have with a lot of this, with the conflict between transgender people and sex-based women's rights, kind of comes down to this. Protecting one group's rights does not inherently diminish the rights of another. It's kind of just a non-argument. Discrimination based on sex and discrimination based on gender identity both stem from rigid gender norms and patriarchal structures. That is the enemy here, not trans people. Everyone can benefit if those patriarchal structures are abolished. But of course, that's not what the TERFs are fighting for, because that's not really what they want. Because they're not really fighting for women's rights. It's about policing a boundary around womanhood, about what their specific definition of womanhood is. In practice, a lot of the campaigning around the trans debate, I hate referring to it as a trans debate because it shouldn't be a debate, goes towards opposing trans-inclusive policies rather than addressing the issues actually affecting everyday women, addressing childcare problems, pay equity, reproductive rights. They're not fighting for any of these things, they're just fighting to take rights away from transgender women. Why? I'm not trans myself, I am a mere lesbian and ally and advocate, and even in being that and speaking about trans issues in the past, even doing so with the best intentions, I have made mistakes, I've misspoken, but I hope everyone can see my intentions in this video, which are support and solidarity, and especially solidarity with all of the authors who have bravely removed their names from the long list for the Polari Prize. I'm going to look into buying and reading as many of these books as possible because they still deserve support. When I first started planning a video about the Polari Prize many months ago, my intention was actually to read all of the books on the shortlist and then talk about them on my channel. Like, that was my original Polari Prize idea. So safe to say that has changed a little bit, but I will still be trying to read as many of these books as possible, just from an entirely different angle now. And I'll leave some links down below to where you can find the books for yourself if you also want to show support. I don't know what's going to happen at this point. I don't know if authors are going to continue to pull out. I don't know if authors are going to put themselves back into contention. Things are moving so fast in this. I have no doubt in the 2 hours it's taken me to film this video, more's probably happened. By the time this video goes up, it's probably going to be already out of date, but bear in mind I'm filming this on the morning of Friday the 15th of August, and if more happens, I'll make a follow-up video. I'm very intrigued to see what happens with the Polari Prize, if they go ahead at all. I'm intrigued to see if they do remove John Boyne's name from the shortlist. I don't know what's going to happen, but I suppose I will keep you updated. So thank you so much for watching. I look forward to hearing all of your thoughts and comments in the comments below. And obviously it goes without saying, this is a safe space for anybody in the LGBTQ+ community. If your comments down below, if your comments are mean, if they are not with the best intentions, I will delete them. I will, because safe space. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you like this kind of content, then make sure you subscribe to me, give this video a like, let me know that you like this kind of stuff, and I will cover more queer book drama whenever it arises. Luckily, there's not actually that much. There's not much queer book drama in this community, which is nice, but when it comes along, it's always big. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.